Clean up your mess and then clean yourself up, sweetheart. You look like you slept in a dumpster. He said it loud. He said it in the middle of the lobby. He said it in front of 47 people, employees filing past with their morning coffee, visitors checking in at the front desk, a young intern who would later say she felt sick to her stomach. Derek Ashford, regional operations manager of Vantage Capital Group, planted himself in the center of that marble floor and looked down at the woman kneeling beside her mop bucket, and he said it like it cost him nothing. Like she cost him nothing. She didn't flinch. She looked up at him, slowly, quietly, the way a person looks up who has absolutely nothing to prove. Her hands were still wrapped around the mop handle. Her uniform was old, yes. There was a small tear along the left shoulder seam. There was another near the hem, but her back was straight. Her eyes were steady. And in the 6 seconds that followed, she did something that not one person in that lobby managed to do. She looked him directly in the face. She said, "Good morning, sir." That was all. Nobody moved. Nobody in that lobby said a single word. The intern looked at her shoes. A senior analyst suddenly found something very interesting on his phone. 47 people witnessed what happened in that lobby on a Tuesday morning in March, and not one of them spoke. Not one. They had no idea who she really was. Derek Ashford had no idea what was about to happen to him. In less than 3 hours, every person in that building would know her name. And Derek Ashford, who had never once been told no in his entire professional life, was about to hear it in the loudest way possible. Have you ever been dismissed? Looked right through? By someone who assumed they already knew your whole story from a single glance? Have you ever stood in a room where no one came to your defense? Let me take you back 48 hours earlier. Her name was Dorothea May Winslow. She was 61 years old. She had been a cleaning operative at Vantage Capital Group's downtown headquarters for 11 months, arriving at 5:30 every morning, working until 2 in the afternoon, then catching a 40-minute bus to her second job at a residential care facility on the east side of the city. She lived alone in a 2-bedroom apartment on Claremont Avenue. The water heater had been unreliable since November. The building had 3 broken stairs that the landlord had been promising to fix since October. The kitchen window did not fully close, and on cold mornings she kept a rolled towel pressed against the frame to hold back the draft. She did not complain about these things. That was simply her life, and she moved through it the way she moved through everything, with a steadiness that came from somewhere deep and old and utterly unshakable. She kept a photograph tucked into the inner pocket of her work bag. Not on her phone. She rarely used her phone for pictures. An actual photograph, worn soft at the corners, the kind that has been folded and unfolded so many times the image has started to crack along the crease. It showed a man in his early 40s standing in front of a building. A real building, a beautiful one, brick and glass, with a sign above the entrance you couldn't quite read in the photograph. He was smiling. He had her eyes exactly. That was her son, Marcus. She did not talk about Marcus at work. She didn't talk about much at work. She came in, she did her job with a precision that her floor supervisor once described as almost unsettling. She smiled at the security guard named Phil every single morning and asked about his daughter's swim competitions, and then she went home. She wore the same 3 uniforms on rotation. She ironed them on Sunday evenings on a board that wobbled slightly on one leg, ironing each one with the care of someone pressing a wedding dress. The tear along the left shoulder of the Tuesday uniform had appeared 2 weeks ago when she caught it on the corner edge of a supply cart. She had sewn it twice. It kept opening. She planned to replace it that weekend. She would not need to. Derek Ashford had been at Vantage Capital Group for 6 years. He had the corner office on the 14th floor, a company car, and a reputation for running what he called a tight ship. What he actually ran was a department where 3 assistants had filed HR complaints over 4 years, documented incidents, time-stamped, signed, submitted through the proper channels. One junior analyst had left the company after a single performance review that she would later describe to a close friend as the most humiliating experience of her professional life. A second had quietly negotiated a settlement and departed without a word. There was a pattern, a clear, consistent, unmistakable pattern. It had been buried. Carefully and completely buried beneath Derek's long-standing friendship with the company's outgoing CEO, a man named Hartwell who was exactly 2 months from retirement. 2 months. Remember that number. Derek did not know the details of the new leadership structure. He had been told, as everyone had, that a transition was in progress. He had been sent briefing documents. He had been scheduled for introductory calls. He had not, as was Derek's habit with anything that felt administrative rather than urgent, paid especially close attention. Because Derek Ashford had never needed to pay especially close attention to what was coming from above him. Things had always, one way or another, arranged themselves in his favor. On Monday, the day before the lobby, he had walked past Dorothea in the hallway near the service elevator and had not looked at her. She was refilling her cart. He nearly clipped her shoulder without slowing down. On Tuesday morning, she was mopping the lobby floor before the main entrance opened. There had been a leak the previous evening. Rainwater had tracked across the marble from the exterior entrance. She had arrived at 5:45, a full 15 minutes before her scheduled start. The lobby was gleaming by the time Derek arrived at 8:12. He walked in, looked down, saw the wet floor sign and said, "Still? You've been here 3 hours and the floor is still wet?" She began to explain that she had just finished and was in the process of removing the sign. He cut her off. "I don't need an explanation. I need the lobby presentable." He looked at her uniform. He looked at the tear along the shoulder. He looked at her hands on the mop handle. He looked at her the way some people look at a piece of furniture they are considering discarding. And then, with a full audience, because the morning rush had well and truly begun, he said it. "Clean up your mess and then clean yourself up, sweetheart. You look like you slept in a dumpster." He held her gaze for 2 more seconds, long enough to make sure it landed, long enough to make sure everyone heard. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator without another word. It was in the space of that turning, in that precise moment, that Dorothea's hand moved briefly and instinctively to the inner pocket of her work bag. She touched the photograph through the fabric. Just for a second. One breath. Then she turned back to the floor and finished her work. What Derek Ashford did not know, what not one of those 47 bystanders in the lobby could possibly have known, was that 2 floors above his office, in the executive conference room on the 16th floor, a meeting had been scheduled for 11 o'clock that morning. A meeting that had taken 18 months to arrange. A meeting that the full board of directors of Vantage Capital Group had flown in from 4 different cities to attend. A meeting whose outcome would determine who, legally and entirely, owned the building they were all standing in. The agenda item was straightforward. A transfer of controlling interest. The acquisition of the firm's majority stake by an incoming investor group. The name at the top of the investor group's filing documents. Winslow Capital Partners, LLC. Marcus Winslow had built his firm from a single rented desk in a shared office space in Atlanta 12 years ago. He had his mother's stillness and his grandfather's mind for numbers. A man named Robert Winslow, who had built the first black-owned insurance company in their county from nothing, who had run it for 31 years, who had sat Marcus down at a kitchen table covered in ledgers when Marcus was 9 years old and said, "You understand money and you understand people. If you understand both, there is no room in the world that will not eventually open for you." Robert Winslow had died when Marcus was 22. He had left his grandson 3 things. A modest sum of money that was, by certain measures, unremarkable, but which Marcus had multiplied over the following decade into something that made financial journalists use phrases like paradigm shift and generational. A leather notebook, battered and thick, filled from cover to cover with margin notes in the tightest, most careful handwriting Marcus had ever seen, formulas, observations, names, lessons, all dated, all precise. And one piece of advice that Robert had been giving Marcus his entire life that Marcus had only fully understood at the graveside. Never let them see you coming. Marcus had not told his mother the details of the Vantage acquisition until 6 weeks before it closed. Not because he didn't trust her. She was the person he trusted most in the world, full stop. But because he knew her. He knew that if she found out, she would offer to leave. She would frame herself as a conflict of interest. She would never in a million years allow herself to be seen as sheltering beneath his position. She had raised him to be the opposite of the kind of person who brandishes power, and so she had no working vocabulary for accepting it as a form of protection. He had told her on a Sunday evening at her kitchen table on Claremont Avenue. Over her coffee, his tea, she had listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You did what your grandfather always said you would." She had gone back to work the next morning. 4:55 bus. 5:30 start. She had not told a single person. She had ironed her uniforms on Sunday, as she always did. She had carried the photograph in her work bag, as she always did. She had mopped the lobby floor. At 10:47 that Tuesday morning, 3 black SUVs entered the parking structure of Vantage Capital Group's headquarters. The building's head of security logged the arrival. Phil, the lobby guard who asked Dorothea about his daughter every morning without fail, watched the elevator indicator climb to 16 and hold there. At 11:03, the board meeting came to order. At 11:22, the vote concluded. Unanimous. At 11:31, Marcus Winslow rode the elevator down to the lobby. He had his grandfather's leather notebook tucked under his arm. He had his mother's eyes. Dorothea was still in the building. She had been asked to stay an additional hour to assist with a spill near the conference rooms on the 3rd floor. She was at her cart near the service hallway when the elevator opened. Marcus crossed the lobby in 12 steps. Phil watched from the security desk without moving. Marcus took both of his mother's hands in his. He said, "It's done, Mama." She closed her eyes for one moment. Just one. Then she opened them and looked at her son, at his grandfather's notebook under his arm, at the smile he was trying to contain, and she nodded once, the way she had always nodded when something confirmed what she had already known. The elevator opened again. Derek Ashford stepped out mid-sentence on a phone call, not looking up, heading for the parking structure. He almost walked into Marcus. He looked up. He processed. The name from the briefing documents he had not read carefully enough surfaced now, 3 hours too late, with the particular cruelty of things understood precisely when understanding them no longer helps. He looked at Marcus's hands, still holding Dorothea's. He looked at Dorothea, and the color, the particular confident flush that Derek Ashford had worn on his face every day for 6 years, simply left, drained away, like a light going out. "Mr. Winslow," he said. Marcus looked at him steadily. No raised voice. No performance. Just the absolute, unruffled quiet of a man who has never needed volume to fill a room. "I believe you spoke to my mother this morning," Marcus said. "In this lobby," in front of the morning staff. Derek's mouth opened, closed. He started. "In front of approximately 40 people," Marcus said. "She was doing her job. She was doing it well. She had been here since before 5:30. Behind Marcus, the elevator had opened a second time. 5 members of Vantage's board of directors, along with 3 senior executives from Winslow Capital, stood in a loose arc. They did not speak. They did not need to. Their presence was its own complete sentence. Phil did not look at his desk. Derek said, "I didn't know who she—" "That's the thing about dignity," Marcus said. "It doesn't require anyone to know. It isn't conditional. It doesn't ask for credentials." He paused. "My grandfather taught me that. He learned it the hard way, in a county that gave him a great many opportunities to practice it." He looked at his mother once more. She was watching Derek with that same expression she had worn at 8:12 that morning. Not anger. Not triumph. Something older and quieter than either of those things. Patience. The patience of a woman who has always, always known how this particular story ends. Marcus turned back to Derek for the last time. He said, "I'd like you to go upstairs and collect your things." Silence. "Done." Derek Ashford was escorted from the building at 12:47 that afternoon. His access credentials were deactivated at 12:51. The HR department opened formal review proceedings by end of business, pulling forward those 3 buried complaints, reading them properly for the first time, noting dates and patterns in specific language that now, in light of everything, read less like isolated incidents and considerably more like a documented record. One of those complaints had been filed 14 months ago by a member of the building's contracted cleaning staff. It was 2 pages long. Precise, specific, professional. It named Derek Ashford. It described a pattern of demeaning language directed at service employees. Not once, not twice, but across a period of months, in spaces he presumed were unseen. It had been marked received, assigned a file number, and never touched again. By Friday, 2 former Vantage employees had contacted an employment attorney. By the following Tuesday, a third, the firm's general counsel released a statement confirming an internal review. The statement did not name Derek Ashford. The internet did not need it to, because someone had posted the lobby footage. The building's security system had recorded the entire exchange. 41 seconds of footage, a still frame, Derek looking down, Dorothea's spine perfectly straight, her hands on the mop handle, her face composed and calm, circulated to over 2 million people in 72 hours. The caption read 4 words: "She owned the building." She did. As of 11:22 that morning, she legally and entirely did. The comment thread reached 80,000 responses. The entry that spread furthest was not about Derek at all. It was about the photograph. Because if you watched the footage carefully, and people watched it very carefully, frame by frame, you could see the moment Dorothea's hand moved to the outer pocket of her work bag. That brief touch, that one breath. Someone wrote, "She knew. She already knew," and she still mopped the floor. That line was shared over 400,000 times. It became the caption on dozens of reposts. It became, for a few days, something people said to one another when they meant, "That is what integrity looks like." That is what it actually looks like. Marcus Winslow's first formal action as controlling interest holder of Vantage Capital Group was the creation of an internal equity and compensation committee, a standing body with external oversight, reporting to the board, charged with auditing pay parity across every level of the firm, including contracted and service staff. The committee's first report was published 9 weeks later. It produced wage corrections for 43 support employees, retroactive to the beginning of the fiscal year. 3 of those employees had worked in the building for more than 5 years without a single cost of living adjustment. The firm's new community investment fund was named the Robert M. Winslow Initiative for Marcus's grandfather. Its founding grant, $250,000, went to a financial literacy program operating in 7 under-resourced middle schools in the city. The leather notebook sat in a glass case in Marcus's office, open to the inside cover, where Robert Winslow had written an inscription decades before any of this was possible. It was from Proverbs chapter 31, "She is clothed with strength and dignity." Dorothea Winslow retired at the end of that quarter. Her last day was a Friday. Phil brought a cake from the bakery 2 blocks over. She hugged him for a long time. She told him his daughter sounded like an extraordinary young woman, and she meant every word. She took the bus home for the last time. She did not replace the Tuesday uniform. She kept it, folded with care, on the shelf in her closet, the one with the tear along the shoulder, the one she had sewn twice. Her grandchildren would ask about it years later, when they were old enough to understand the shape of the story. She would tell them, "I ironed it every Sunday, because you do the work, regardless of who is watching, regardless of who sees. And if this story moved something in you today, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. And leave me a comment. Have you ever been in a room where someone decided they already knew your whole story? What did you do?" I read every single one. Here is what really gets me about Dorothea. Not the ending. The ending is wonderful, and it is just, and it is everything it should be. But endings are easy to love. What gets me is 5:45 on a Tuesday morning. Dark outside, a bus she had to catch before the rest of the city had stirred, a floor she mopped until it shone, for a building that in a few hours her son would legally own. And she did not cut a corner. She did not phone it in. She did not do the minimum and watch the clock. She did the work exactly the way she always did it, because that is the kind of woman she is. That is the thing that was never on any piece of paper, never in any filing, never in any camera frame, the thing that built Marcus Winslow before Marcus Winslow built anything. Derek saw a torn uniform. He saw what he assumed was the bottom of the room. He was wrong in every possible direction. But here is the harder question, the one I want to leave with you. How many times have we been Derek? Not loudly, maybe. Not cruelly, in the way he was cruel. But how many times have we walked past someone without looking up? How many times have we decided, in one glance, in one assumption, in 1/2 second of a busy morning, what someone's story was? And how many times have we been completely, entirely wrong? What would it actually cost us to look? Tell me. I want to know.